the real threat to China's global dominance isn't the US.
Ha ha ha, then who is it?
India. While everyone's eyes are on Washington, Beijing is quietly locking horns with New Delhi in a silent yet seismic power struggle. Since 2020, India has blocked over 300 Chinese investment proposals, triggering Beijing to retaliate by choking tech supply chains, from EV parts to smartphone components. Trade between them hit $136 billion, yet China holds the upper hand with a $100+ billion surplus.
It reminds me something.
But here's the twist. Despite the rivalry, China may need India to keep global markets stable and Western sanctions at bay. This isn't just a regional spat. It's a high-stakes economic battle that could reshape the future of Asia and the world. Hit a like button, subscribe, and let's find out if China can survive the dynamic rise of India. To China, India isn't just another emerging economy, it's the one power with the scale to rival Beijing's global ambitions. The 2020 Galwan clash turned simmering tension into open suspicion. In its aftermath, India tightened scrutiny on Chinese investments, freezing over 300 proposals and tightening tech sector regulations. Beijing responded subtly but effectively. Instead of confronting India head-on, China diverted its capital elsewhere: Vietnam, Hungary, Mexico, quietly building alternate supply chains. In 2024 alone, Chinese firms invested more than $4.5 billion in Vietnam, reinforcing its role as a manufacturing hub. Meanwhile, India found itself bypassed in major industrial expansions, from EV batteries to consumer electronics. This is strategic exclusion.
So China's playing 4D chess and India's stuck in customs clearance?
India's China Plus One policy, designed to lure companies seeking alternatives to China, is struggling to gain full traction. The barriers aren't just economic, they're geopolitical, shaped by mistrust and maneuvering. For Beijing, empowering India is a risk. For New Delhi, relying on Chinese components is a vulnerability. And the space between them? It's where the next phase of global economic power is being decided.
When your China Plus One strategy turns into China minus you, that's gotta stink.
Trade has evolved from a tool for economic growth to a weapon for geopolitical dominance. According to the UNCT aid, today's global trade flows are increasingly driven by national security concerns and the quest for strategic leverage. While many nations are de-risking their exposure to China, few have the industrial scale to rival its dominance, not even India. In 2023, trade between India and China reached a staggering $136 billion. However, the imbalance is telling. China holds a surplus of more than $100 billion. India imports crucial tech components, from smartphones to machinery, while its exports to China are more limited. This economic dependency is a double-edged sword. India is heavily reliant on Chinese supply chains, yet it's also vulnerable to Beijing's strategic moves.
When your trade bill looks like a credit card statement from China, it might be time to rethink the relationship.
Enter the US, now India's largest trade partner. In 2023, India-US trade hit nearly $200 billion, surpassing India-China exchanges in key sectors like technology and pharmaceuticals. But China is watching closely. With India increasingly aligning its trade priorities with the West, Beijing is facing a delicate balancing act. The US-India partnership is gaining momentum, but it's not without consequences. Every economic shift, every trade deal, has the potential to redraw the lines of Asia's power struggle. For China, this isn't just about market share. It's a high-stakes game of keeping India from finding stable alternatives that reduce Beijing's leverage. China's covert strategy against India isn't about missiles or border skirmishes. It's about the silent sabotage of supply chains. Chinese firms have been accused of deliberately delaying critical tech components to India's booming electric vehicle, EV sector, and smartphone industry. The ripple effect? Production delays, cost overruns, and a growing vulnerability in India's tech ambitions. It's not just business as usual, this is geopolitical maneuvering in its subtlest form. In this complex trade war, China has learned to weaponize its industrial dominance. By blocking vital parts and stalling supply chains, it subtly undermines India's drive for technological independence. China's leverage isn't always visible, but it's powerful. With key components for EVs and iPhones, China holds the strings.
Turns out, China doesn't need to pull the plug, just unplug a few chips and watch the chaos unfold.
India, on the other hand, missed the China-light model that worked for nations like Vietnam and Mexico. Why? There are several reasons. First, restrictive laws and regulations make it harder for foreign companies to thrive in India's market. Second, India's push for self-reliance in tech, while admirable, has slowed its ability to integrate Chinese investments without risking national security. Lastly, India's growing fear of China's geopolitical leverage makes it hesitant to embrace a similar approach yet. While Vietnam and Mexico found ways to benefit from Chinese investment without becoming overly dependent, India's more cautious stance has left its factories vulnerable, a victim of a well-played Chinese strategy. In the grand game of global geopolitics, the US isn't just another player, it's India's most important ally, and that's sending shockwaves through China. India's trade with the US surged to over $130 billion in 2024, making America its top trading partner. But the partnership goes far beyond economics. The US and India are bound by a defense pact that promises a decade of cooperation across land, sea, air, and cyberspace. From joint military exercises to cutting-edge defense technology, the US is investing heavily in India's security, making it a formidable counterbalance to China's growing influence. The Indo-Pacific pivot, a key focus of US strategy, is seen by China as a direct attempt at containment. The US is strengthening its ties with India in a bid to create a counterweight to China's power in the region, positioning India as a strategic partner to challenge China's dominance in Asia. However, India is playing a delicate game. While it welcomes the support, it's also careful to maintain its strategic autonomy. India is not just a US proxy. Its leadership in global affairs stems from its own ambitions. India's quest for a global role that balances its interests with those of the US and China is a constant tightrope walk, but one that's reshaping the Indo-Pacific's geopolitical landscape. While China's subtle sabotage tactics are real, India's biggest obstacle is often internal. Labor laws, land acquisition hurdles, and regulatory red tape are deeply ingrained challenges that have stunted India's growth potential for decades. These bottlenecks slow down both foreign and domestic investments, preventing India from capitalizing on opportunities that could elevate it to the global stage. However, India's ambitions aren't out of reach. In recent years, reforms like the Production-Linked Incentive (PLI) scheme have injected new energy into key sectors like electronics and manufacturing. By offering incentives to local and foreign companies, India is aiming to position itself as a global manufacturing hub. Additionally, substantial investments in infrastructure, $1.4 trillion in 2024 alone, are improving connectivity and reducing operational friction. If India can successfully navigate these internal challenges, it can rise on its own terms. Even without China's cooperation or its industrial might, India's potential is undeniable. By continuing reforms and overcoming structural obstacles, India can transform itself into an economic powerhouse. The question is not if India will rise, but when. Despite rising tensions and economic hostilities, the door to cooperation between India and China hasn't closed entirely. In 2024, Prime Minister Modi and President Xi reopened limited diplomatic channels, signaling a cautious interest in stabilizing relations. The Chinese embassy even issued a rare statement calling for joint India-China efforts to counterbalance US tariffs and trade restrictions, a subtle nod to shared economic interests in an increasingly divided world.
Who knew? The fastest way to soar relations might just be a good old-fashioned tariff from Washington.
Behind closed doors, many Indian business leaders agree. Completely isolating China might hurt India more than it helps. Chinese tech and machinery still power large segments of India's manufacturing and electronics industries. And with India's imports from China still hovering around $100 billion annually, full decoupling isn't realistic, at least not yet.
It's like a bad relationship. Can't live without them. Can't run your supply chains without them.
Instead, a new approach is quietly emerging: strategic decoupling combined with selective engagement. In this model, India limits China's footprint in critical sectors like telecom and defense, while maintaining cooperation in less sensitive areas like raw materials, consumer goods, and intermediate tech. The rivalry remains real, but so does the interdependence. As both countries navigate a new era of economic nationalism and shifting alliances, reconciliation might not mean friendship, but pragmatism. And sometimes in geopolitics, that's more powerful than trust. China's not just facing India, it's juggling crises everywhere. At home, it's grappling with a shrinking workforce, a bursting real estate bubble, and an economy that's losing steam. Abroad, it's locked in a trade war with the US, bracing for flashpoints in Taiwan and the South China Sea, and watching global trust in its model fade. Enter India, young, ambitious, and increasingly aligned with the West. If India rises while China falters, Beijing could lose its grip as Asia's dominant force. But here's the twist. If India fails to rise too, the West's whole China alternative strategy might backfire. So, can India tip the scales? Or will both giants drag each other down? Smash that like button, subscribe, and share this video before China censors it. And don't miss our upcoming series. Who do you think will define Asia's future? China, India, or someone else entirely? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Catch you in the next one.